He's been here before. The pressure, the expectations, the spotlight. But this time, Stefanos Tsitsipas walks into Indian Wells with something he hasn't felt in years: real doubt. Because standing on the other side of the net in round one is a player who has already proven he knows exactly how to beat him. Denis Shapovalov. And if you're just looking at rankings or reputation, you might think this is a routine first round for Tsitsipas. But if you dig deeper into the numbers, the rivalry, and the current form of both players, this match suddenly starts to look like something completely different. In fact, there's one statistic in their head-to-head that should make Tsitsipas fans very nervous. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's talk about why this matchup is so fascinating and, honestly, a little surprising for round one of Indian Wells. Indian Wells is supposed to be the tournament where top players ease into the draw. The BNP Paribas Open is one of the biggest events outside the Grand Slams. Players travel across the world to compete in the California desert, and usually, the early rounds are filled with warm-up matches. This year, that script gets thrown out the window, because Stefanos Tsitsipas versus Denis Shapovalov in the first round is not a warm-up. It's a collision. Two former top 10 players, two of the most explosive shotmakers in tennis, and two players who are both trying to prove something in 2026. But here's the twist. Neither of them arrives in Indian Wells with momentum, and that's what makes this match feel unpredictable. Let's start with Tsitsipas. At the beginning of the season, things actually looked promising. He started the year at the United Cup and went undefeated in his matches. 3 wins, strong performances, and the kind of confident shot-making that reminded fans why he was once considered a future Grand Slam champion. But the results around him told a slightly different story. Despite his individual wins, his team still crashed out in the quarterfinals. It wasn't the start of the year he imagined, but it wasn't disastrous either. Then came Adelaide, and suddenly the momentum vanished. Tsitsipas was knocked out in the first round. Just like that. It felt abrupt, unexpected, the kind of loss that makes analysts pause and wonder if something deeper is happening with the player's form. He tried to reset at the Australian Open. For Tsitsipas, Melbourne has always carried special meaning. It's a tournament where he's had huge crowds behind him, where his aggressive style usually shines. But this year, it didn't happen. Instead of a deep run, he exited in the second round, and suddenly, the questions started getting louder. Is Tsitsipas still the same player who once dominated Masters events? Is he stuck in a transitional phase? Or is this just a temporary slump that every top player goes through? February offered a mixed answer. At the ABN AMRO Open, Tsitsipas again failed to go deep, another second-round exit. Then came Qatar. Finally, a sign of life. Tsitsipas reached the quarterfinals, showing flashes of the confident baseline aggression that made him one of the most dangerous players on tour. His serve looked solid. His forehand started firing again. For a moment, it felt like the comeback might be building. Then Dubai happened, and that's where things took another unexpected turn. Tsitsipas entered the tournament as the defending champion. That usually gives a player extra motivation. They know the courts, they know the conditions, and they carry the confidence of having already lifted the trophy there. But instead of defending his title, Tsitsipas was knocked out in the very first round. Hugo Humbert sent him home early. And just like that, Tsitsipas arrived at Indian Wells carrying more questions than answers. Now let's talk about Denis Shapovalov. Because if Tsitsipas has been inconsistent, Shapovalov's season has been even more unpredictable. His year started with a tough loss in Brisbane. First-round exit. Not the kind of opening statement any player wants to make. At the Australian Open, he managed to grab 1 win, which at least gave him some rhythm. But that run ended quickly when Marin Cilic eliminated him in the second round. At that point, the narrative around Shapovalov felt familiar. Incredible talent, spectacular shot-making, but difficulty sustaining consistency over multiple tournaments. Then something interesting happened. Dallas. This was the tournament where Shapovalov entered as the defending champion. And suddenly, he looked like a completely different player. He started beating opponents with authority. Rafael Jodar, Alexander Kovacevic, Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. 3 solid wins, and suddenly Shapovalov was back in the semifinals. For fans who love aggressive tennis, this version of Shapovalov is electric. His one-handed backhand explodes off the racket. His shot selection is fearless, and when his rhythm clicks, he can overwhelm almost anyone. But even during that run, there were signs that the consistency problem hadn't disappeared. In the semifinal, he ran into Ben Shelton, and Shelton stopped the run. It wasn't a collapse, but it reminded everyone that Shapovalov still struggles to maintain that high level for long stretches. Then came Dubai, and the momentum from Dallas vanished. Shapovalov lost in the first round to Pablo Carreno Busta, so now we arrive at Indian Wells. Players. 2 former top 10 stars. 2 seasons that have started with flashes of brilliance but also frustrating inconsistency. Which brings us to the rivalry. Because when you look at their head-to-head, something surprising jumps out immediately. Denis Shapovalov leads the rivalry 4 matches to 2. That alone might surprise casual fans who assume Tsitsipas has dominated this matchup. But the real detail is even more interesting. All 4 of Shapovalov's wins came on hard courts. And where are they? Playing this match? Indian Wells? Hard court. Now, the conditions here are a little different from typical hard courts. The desert air and the slower surface tend to produce longer rallies. Players who rely purely on speed and flat hitting sometimes struggle here, and that might actually help Tsitsipas. But before we talk about that advantage, let's go back to their last meeting. Because it happened in Miami in 2024, and Shapovalov didn't just win that match, he won it in straight sets. That performance showed something important about this rivalry. When Shapovalov is confident, his aggressive style can disrupt Tsitsipas's rhythm. Tsitsipas loves controlling rallies with his forehand and using his heavy topspin to push opponents behind the baseline. But Shapovalov doesn't always play that game. He takes the ball early. He attacks angles. He hits winners from positions where most players would just try to stay in the rally. That unpredictability has historically bothered Tsitsipas. But this time, the conditions could change everything. Indian Wells courts are slower than most hard courts on the tour. The ball bounces higher, rallies stretch longer, and players need patience as much as power. Those are conditions that traditionally favor Tsitsipas.